Date with a Debut is recorded and produced on a Wapical country, and I pay my respects to all elders past and present and extend that to any First Nations people tuning in. Always was, always will be, Aboriginal land. On with the show. Welcome to Date with a Debut, a podcast about debut authors, their incredible books, and their journey to publication. If you're looking for a new author to discover or writing inspiration for your own story and you don't know where to start, this is the place to be. I'm Nick Wasiliev, host of the show, and I'm delighted to welcome another debut author in today's episode. If you enjoyed this show, jump online and give us a thumbs up, a 5-star review. It really helps the show out. If you also want to hear episodes when they drop, be sure to subscribe to Words and Nerds, or you can subscribe to Date with a Debut on Podbean to hear the latest episodes as they drop. Want to support the show more? You can also subscribe to my Patreon in the description to get early access to episodes, book reviews, recommendations, and a whole lot more. Wherever you are listening, thank you for listening to us and supporting the Australian book industry. You can also find any books mentioned in today's podcast down in the description. Today, I'm joined by Thomas Vowles, a screenwriter and author from Naarm. He's worked with production companies based in Los Angeles, London, and Australia, as well as having written a collection of short stories. And his debut feature film script, Birth, is currently in pre-production. We're here to talk about his brand new debut psychological thriller, Our New Gods, published by University of Queensland Press, which you can get a copy of right now in the description. We will discuss mild spoilers, so I recommend you grab a copy now, or at least very soon. I started off by asking Thomas about the process of comparing creative projects, with his debut novel falling close to the release of his debut feature film in pre-production, and how his experiences with the Melbourne queer scene influenced the creation of this story. Finally, I will add a small warning: this podcast does contain some strong adult themes and subject matter, so reader discretion is advised. Thomas, welcome to Date with a Debut.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Nick.
I would love to start by talking to you a little bit, if I can, about, I know we've got a book to talk about here, but I got sidetracked looking at your career and all the amazing stuff that you do on the side. And I'm fully aware that this is like not the only project that you're about to birth into the world, because you've also got like a film that is in pre-production. I know. Did you appreciate it?
Yeah, great. Love that.
Yeah.
Love that tie-in.
So, yeah, I mean, like, busy year for you. Lots of projects.
It's nice. Yeah. I mean, with film, it takes so long and there's so many stops and starts, and you're constantly, you do the work of writing it, and then there's this whole other part that the project moves into, which the writer doesn't have any control over. So I'm just kind of standing back and watching that unfold with my fingers crossed that, what with everything happening in the US, etc., that it keeps that momentum that it's picked up in the last couple of years. And that speaks to the incredible director and producer who are out there hustling in LA.
Yeah, I was going to say, it feels like on the surface, obviously it's not true, but you've got the director, you've got producers, you've got actors who are kind of all there putting it all together. And so there's kind of a very much a combined effort, not just the screenwriting. But you've got this film, Birth, coming. You've also done short stories, an episode, Zine, while we're here. So you've kind of been in this writing headspace for a while. First of all, I'm jealous. Just I wish I could maintain that level of creativity. But obviously we get, as a natural part of being on this show, we get lots of advice about how to hone the craft of writing on this podcast. And obviously, I think the most effective one you get off frequently that comes up is you become a writer by writing. You just write. That's what you do. But I kind of want to just praise your ability to straddle so many different types of writing. And I want to ask a question that kind of feels a bit impossible to start, which is, how does one creatively compartmentalize writing prose compared to turning over to writing a script, which is obviously got very different to write, and then panning over to writing short stories? How do you do what you do?
Wow, love that. Good question. I think that it all comes from a very similar place. It all comes from the same impulse. And it's an impulse to create, to tell a story, to put words on the page. And the different forms have strengths in terms of what they do well, what kinds of stories lend themselves to the different forms. There's so many different ways of telling telling a story, and a different form lends itself to a different kind of story or a different approach. And these are the things that I'm thinking about when I'm thinking about what would serve this story best, where I want to take it, what things I want to get close to, or how I want the audience to experience it. These are all, the answer to that like lies in the form. And so I don't feel like there's compartmentalizing, because they all come from the same place, which is an impulse towards getting something out into the world. And how that's done is like up to me as the writer, but also it like has to exist within the structure of other people. So I'm also taking that into consideration when I start a project.
That's a great answer to the question, honestly, because you sometimes different formats and different types of stories lend themselves to different types of ways of getting there. Like, great example, Cats is amazing on stage, but it didn't translate to film very well. As a great example.
Didn't work. Sorry.
I mean, it's a
Maybe
weird.
Give it another shot.
Yeah, I mean, if you get really high, it's a strange experience that is insane. But it's the film that will have one of those weird cult followings. It feels like that, but kind of back to the point.
She's a badge of honor, I think. To be fair to James Corden in that film.
Out of curiosity, how does because you now dabble across these different types of writing, does writing in one format often lend or benefit itself to another? Because the reason why I ask that is, one thing I really like about Our New Gods, before we kind of dive into it, is the clear use of place that you really nail here. We're in the Melbourne queer scene in this story, the laneways, all the parties, where to get piercings, where to score the best burritos. Pardon the comparison, but the visuals you provide actually, like, they're just little tidbits, but as you say, you just use a couple of things, but that allows the reader to fill in the blanks really, really well. How does writing in one format, for example, being a screenwriter and thinking about, I need to make sure this translates to how it visually appears on a screen, how does that lend itself and benefit writing, for example, for prose?
Great. Love this question. I have a background. I mean, my background as a screenwriter started from studying screenwriting at a film school. Took myself over to London and got a bachelor in screenwriting. So when I'm telling stories, I'm definitely drawing upon that education. It's just like a foundational way of how I think about storytelling. And it really informs my understanding of plot, character, place, like you say, like theme, just how you can like get closer to all those things. Began like my thinking about that began through this thing called the screenplay and film, but like let's take it back to the screenplay. So for this project and for the next book I'm writing, I started them as screenplays just because that's where my mind takes it organically. And then I enter it, there's kind of like a doorway into what then becomes the book or the prose form. Yeah. So there's this real like interplay between the two ways of thinking. And I do think that there obviously are a lot of similarities in how you approach the different forms, but there's also like differences, and being aware of those differences and being able to manipulate them or play with them is comes across as this kind of exchange between these two different ways that I think about story.
That's such an interesting process to like start it as a screenwriting, like kind of as an actual script,
Yeah,
format, but then translate it over.
you can write things faster. Like screenplay, like screenplays are very, very hard, but what they're very good at is because it's sparse on the page, you can get to a you can write a scene much faster than you can if you're writing it prose, just because there's less words. So I find it very useful to explore an idea or a concept in a screenplay form, just because you have access to those ideas and can see them play out much quicker than if you were like, I'm going to sit down and write the first chapter. Like that could take a couple of days, you know.
Yeah, no, I get you. It's a cool process, actually. Like, kind of similar. I mean, I was chatting with Steph Tidsel. She's kind of does writing for a couple of different shows and has been on Netflix and stuff like that. And she often did comparisons where she would write her character being on a bus as a way to kind of get into the zone. So changing it over and doing it as a screen. As a kind of a screen, like actually starting at from like a screenwriter perspective is really, really cool. I think I actually also want to ask you kind of actually before we really do the deep dive in, I'm curious about the starting point because I'm trying to be as spoiler free as I can here, but a lot of stuff happens in this book. It is a psychological thriller. Stuff goes down. And I mean, there is, I mean, you've written a lot about being a queer person in Melbourne. I mean, your short stories, for example, really talk on that well. And there's a great line early on in the book where Ash kind of talks about one of his flatmates, Sam, as wanting to be part of the tribe, so to speak, in kind of a way of thinking about that environment. I know often if you are a writer, being in such an environment that has such loaded activities, imageries with different meanings and different contexts, that can obviously, I'm assuming, was that where it kind of galvanized interest in writing a psychological thriller set in this environment? I just want to know, how did this story come about in the mind of Tom?
Yeah, I live in Melbourne, so it felt very natural for me to write about these places that I was inhabiting and the people that I was meeting there. And the questions that I had and the reason why I turned to the novel, why I wanted to write this story, was questions that were playing out against the backdrop of the place I was living. So in order to get closer to those questions, it just felt very natural to place my characters in this same world as me. And also it was things I hadn't seen before. I wanted to put into this book places and like emotional sensibilities that I hadn't encountered much in literature. And obviously people have written about Melbourne, but I also saw this creative opportunity to take this city that's so well known and kind of show a side to it that readers don't see that much, which is like for the sake of marketing, we're calling the Melbourne queer scene. But I think it's like a bit broader than that. Like, I don't really know what that actually means, to be honest. It sounds really good when you're pitching it, but like what that actually is hard to define. But I know that like where people are going, the places they're hanging out, the places they're having sex, that kind of thing. That's what I wanted to explore.
Let's talk about it. Let's talk about this book. Let's get
into it, Nick.
I know. Let's get into it. It's exciting. I'm holding up our New Gods on our YouTube channel. The actual main cover is also coming up with amazing quotes from Christos Choulkas and Madeline Gray. First of all, at the time of us recording, the book isn't out. It's like 2 or 3 days from coming out. But by the time everyone is listening to this, it will be out in the world. How are you feeling? Are you feeling nervous?
Guys, I'll be a different person. All this excitement and anxiety will have been alleviated as I step into a world where I am met with success. So how are you, Tom? How's it going on the other side? That's the main thing. Are you looking after yourself? Are you having fun? Because it's hard to put a book into the world, turns out. And so I'm just trying to be present, trying to have fun. Everyone around me is so great. I'm surrounded by such an incredible team at UQP. But just very excited to share with people what I've been working on and to give people an experience that I would be excited to have. Does that make sense? I'm like, here's a book. This book is something that I hope will take you somewhere. And it's exciting to think that maybe it will.
I think it will. I think that made complete sense, by the way. I know I can completely understand being like, I'm trying to come up with an answer here, but it's like, yes, no, it absolutely made sense.
Thank you. Good to hear.
So with that in mind, we have you've told me before we started recording that you have listened to a couple of episodes, so you know what comes next here. I am in a lift. I am going up. You have the opportunity for a 1-minute pitch. What is Our New Gods about?
Our New Gods is a literary psychological thriller set in the Melbourne queer scene. We're following Ash. He's 21. He's just got to Melbourne. He has one friend who he's kind of desperately in love with, James. It's kind of a secret crush. James has a new boyfriend, Raph. They're all at a party. Ash witnesses Raph do something that is very disturbing, that makes him think that Raph could be a bad guy. And so it begins. It spirals from there. Ash is trying to figure out if Raph is going to put James in danger, if he needs to protect his friend, or if he's sort of inventing this narrative because he's in love with James, because he's jealous, he's paranoid. So the story is about that kind of murky space where he's trying to figure out what's going on and filtering that through his own subjectivity and trying to make sense of all of that.
Ding! Nailed it. Love it.
What floor are you going to? What are you doing up here? Are you a film producer? Let's go.
They're all on the top floor, aren't they? This is such a fantastic book. I love me some psychological thrillers with some dark elements. There is humor in this book as well, but also it's a very intense examination of, I mean, from my own interpretation reading it, if I was trying to like think about, there are so many elements that you rightly touch on in your pitch, but in my head, if there's one thing I'm really tried to boil this down to from my own experience, this book felt like a great examination of the human condition to belong, but also the fear that humans have in being alone, and how much can someone potentially compromise themselves in every way possible just to avoid loneliness, but also how power in not being alone can corrupt those trying to avoid it. Does that make sense? That made sense, didn't it?
The power in not being alone can corrupt those trying to avoid it. The power. Wow, I love that. That's so great.
You can steal it. It's cool.
Yeah, I'm gonna write that down.
For me, it just kind of felt like there's the fear of being alone, but there's also, if you don't want to be alone, if you are afraid of that, how much will you compromise yourself to avoid loneliness? I know there's more to it than just that, but when I was because it's used through the lens of Ash is someone new in this environment trying to find themselves as a person and also kind of redefine themselves. It just felt, I was trying to boil it down to like a great point or an examination that all of these characters are around.
Yeah, you nailed it. That was also like the place that I wrote it from, was that pain and trying to make sense of that in myself. And I'm glad that it translates. Yeah. And there's this other aspect to it, right? The how you can disfigure yourself when you're in those places, when you have that like need for someone who will give you the things that you don't have, that you've never got from the world. That's like a dangerous place to be in because well, as the book kind of hypothesizes, it can be a slippery slope. Like where is the base of that? Where is the point that you turn around and you kind of confront the parts of yourself that have brought you here? Like, or do you just keep falling? Do you just keep disappearing into that like state of despair?
It's a deep question, and I mean, the great place to start with this book is with our narrator, with Ash, because this is a world where Ash at the start is very much an outsider coming in. He originally grew up in a very different, difficult environment. We see the actions by Raph. I mean, it's not necessarily, it happens in the first, chapter, so it's not exactly a spoiler.
Yeah.
But the actions of Raph that really, really unsettle him. Then you throw in an environment where drugs are casual sex. There's confusion with love and emotions, and then the perceptions that Ash has trying to fit into this environment get tangled up quickly. We have
Yeah,
ourselves an unreliable narrator here.
we do.
Tell me about crafting that and bringing the dynamics of that scene into that element of storytelling, because kind of going back to a point that we were talking about earlier, this is definitely something that when it comes to this interpretation of this environment, we haven't seen a lot of before, how messy and complicated it can be.
It's so messy and complicated, you guys. It's just like a human thing, right? To grow up. I mean, it's been described as a Bildungsroman, which it is, but that's not where I started. I didn't come in saying I'm going to tell a coming of age story. It was just like, I'm going to tell a story about someone who's navigating a space that feels very difficult for them because of who they are and because of like their needs and desires. And then because he's 21, it becomes a coming of age story. But like you can be any age navigating those spaces, I think. And the unreliable narrator is unreliable because the reason we're all unreliable because of our own subjectivity and within a world that is like inherently unreliable and the terror of that. And he's confronted with these big questions. The stakes are huge. I mean, it's a psychological thriller, so of course they are, but something I wanted to do was to treat those situations as very real, to honor the kind of psychological stakes of them as well. This idea of my friend, the person I love, the one person in the world who I really care for and who has ever cared for me, I think like could be murdered tomorrow. The unreliable narrator is all of us, I think. And then that's just like heightened in this context of the psychological thriller. I went in knowing that I wanted to tell a story about someone who was doing things that they maybe wouldn't be able to explain why they were doing them. That felt really interesting to me, and I that really informed who this character was and also the plot. Into like once I was like, oh, I don't have to know exactly like why he's following this impulse. It's truly just like him following an impulse. Then you can go into like kind of weird, complicated scenarios because they're not having to justify it. I mean, he's trying to justify it, but kind of one of the energies of the book is there's this undercurrent to everything that is informing action, that is kind of mysterious as to what that actually is. And so there's this like unreliability in that as well, which I think is a big part of the experience of the book.
Yes, definitely. And I think with Ash, particularly, I mean, we'll get into the other characters in a second, but Ash, we find him in a very interesting place to begin with. He's a very lost soul trying to kind of find his feet when we meet him for the first time. There was a great description from a review of this book, which I'm going to now steal from readings, where you're trying to navigate the heady kaleidoscope of the gay scene. And I think that what I was particularly interested in with Ash, as the story kind of get on, was there was a real desire to redefine himself and his ideas of himself. There was a kind of a discovery element, and yet, there was a hollow void. There's a hollow void in this character, particularly very early on, that he's clearly struggling to overcome, which we discover a little more as we dive in further. Tell me a little bit about Ash himself, because I mean, he's the lens of this story.
Yeah, I love what you're saying about him wanting to reinvent himself. He's 21. He just moved to Melbourne from a small town in Western Australia. So it's very exciting. He's in a new world. He's in a world where there's, for the first time, people around him who are like him, other queer people. And that's very exciting, and also part of the danger, or raises the stakes for him, because he really wants to fit in here. That's very important. And like you say, there's this very powerful place that he's left behind, which is how he was raised. There's a relationship with his father, which is very complicated. The relationship with the house that he grew up in, his father's house, that although he's in a new city, he's very focused on being this new person that he wants to be, and building that by design. There is this pull towards all that which he just can't just simply leave behind, but is terrifyingly, one of the questions is potentially I will just never be able to escape that. Maybe that's who I am, and what does that mean? Who does that make me? And so we also see that play out in the narrative of the book, within the relationships that he's having.
Yes, definitely. And one thing that really did grab me with Ash later, that relationship with his father, as you mentioned, is a major part of his story, and the house itself. Because I know, early on, he mentions his father built the house himself. There's these weird things like a random hole in the middle of the house, because it's a strange space and place and setting. It's a house and a life that his father had built for himself. And I think Ash, for the most of it, barely feels like it's not his life. He barely has any control of his life. And not to do a spoiler, but there's a particular moment later in the book which really plays into kind of those other subtexts of power, and power in relationships involving his dad, that I was really it took me back a little bit, in kind of this scene where he's in the bathroom, which we will not spoil for listeners, but just a really interesting scene in terms of that power dynamic and that desire for, another thing about Ash is just he wants control in himself, but as the book goes on, there's also an element of wanting to have control that comes with that a little bit.
Yeah. Wow, that's so interesting that you picked up on that. Yeah, he's really struggling. He's trying to do a lot. Poor Ash. It's this experience that I think a lot of queer people have, which is struggling with the father figure, the masculine figure. Maybe things are changing. I'm 34, and for a lot of my friends and a lot of people of older generations, I know it was the father that they had problems with, in terms of it was that figure who really defined how they feel about their like queerness in a lot of ways. And well, just because of like masculinity and the pressures that creates, and what does it mean to be a man who loves another man. I mean, the book is not like, oh, it's so hard to be gay, or like, why doesn't my father love me? I mean, a little bit, but there's also that, just like in terms of honoring the truth of that like, to have come from a small town with a certain mindset, and that doing something to him as a character, as a person, plus other pressures of his early life, but then taking those ideas and putting them in this story and in this setting as something that he kind of has to tussle with if he's going to do what he wants to do, which is like build a new life, build a new self, find friendships and a community.
Yeah, I found it particularly contrasting. It's kind of it's interesting that you mentioned that, because there is the rural. I mean, I feel like it's still very much that rural setting compared to the urban setting, and by contrast, we have the other kind of two characters in this kind of love triangle, if it is a word to begin with. You know,
Yeah.
we have James, who is the object of Ash's affections. When we meet James, he's a very easygoing, cheerful soul, studying architecture, living in an apartment, we think is paid for by his father. He's just that perspective of loving life and being in the moment when we meet him.
He's the
And
guy.
yet
He's the guy.
he is. And yet he is partnered with Raph, who leaves an impression on the reader with his actions and behaviors towards Uth in that first chapter. I found there was a particular, the scene that really kind of it gave me an impression or an ominous feeling, was the first time that Ash and Raph were alone together. And that whole description of character assassination, where Raph kind of makes Ash kind of sort of agree with him on something. And in my head, I'm like, you're twisting the words. Oh, God, Jesus.
Yeah. Love
Tell
it.
me
Who
about
is
these
this guy?
Who is this guy? Tell me about these two characters.
Yeah. You described James so well. He's like, I mean, we see him through Ash's eyes. So when we meet him, he's the guy. He's the guy you want to hang out with. He's very affable, very laid back, fun. He knows where the good parties are. He dresses well. He's the symbol of like everyone, like everything Ash wants to be, and everything Ash wants as well. He wants that attention. He wants that attention from someone like this. Someone who feels very secure in themselves, someone who has no problem making friends, someone who has like a hot Brazilian boyfriend. And he does idolize him, which is maybe part of the problem, Ash. No one's perfect. But then Raph, is he's cut from a similar cloth in terms of he's also one of the cool guys. He's the DJ at the party at like in the opening scene, like cool. He comes from Brazil, so he has this aura of I mean, my boyfriend's a Brazilian, so I speak about Brazil and Brazilians as someone who has something to do with them. It's not like I just plucked this Brazilian archetype out of the psyche, but it does kind of borrow from this idea of like the sexy Latino, you know, the sexy Latino, the passion, is definitely like borrowing some of those tropes, which is again like Ash's subjectivity, and he's encountering people from like other countries for the first time in some ways. And like you were saying, the thing about Raph is there's always this big question mark over him that the reader has because Ash has. So there's always this potential for him like dipping into violence or antagonism, and Ash is always looking for that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, there's a lot. I mean, there's so many other characters that are in this story. I mean, we've mentioned Sam, the other housemate, and Sarah and Damien also in the background in that kind of share house where Ash lives. But I think in this particular case, when
Yeah.
it comes to the themes of it, there's also Booth, who, you know, you come close to kind of boiling these themes down. In that scene where they kind of go swimming together early on, and Ash, in typical unreliable narrator fashion, is asking about the actions of that night. Mild spoiler: Booth is the person who received said degrading, violent acts upon him. Small spoiler, but again, it's at the start of the story,
Yeah.
so we're not giving anything away. And the response that Booth gave of "he's not a good man, but he's mine" is so loaded.
Yeah.
Because right there you have the power element, you've got the possession element that kind of in a weird way goes both ways, but there's also a blurring of intimacy, but also violence, which then resurfaces many
Yeah.
times, which only makes things more ambiguous for the reader, which isn't what I know you probably wanted to do. It makes it much more complicated. And also, I'll just add with that scene and these themes coming out there, it serves as a real omen for what comes next. Booth's an interesting
Yeah.
character and what he brings out in that scene.
Yeah. Wow, that's such an astute point that there is, I mean, like the reason I wrote the book, it's there because it was one of the big things that drew me towards this story, which is the ambiguities and contradictions inherent in desire and in those profound relationships of love. And like we were saying before, what happens when you really want something or need someone, and the places that can take you, the darknesses and the dangers that can lead to. Booth is that very concentrated, I think, in that he has crossed some sort of line where he like understands, I think he understands the dynamic. To say he's not a good man, but he's mine, is to own that part of himself that knows that he's like dishonoring his personhood or his values, and yet wants that. It's so brutal. I mean, saying it out loud, it's so sad. I think it's a sad book. It's a sad book for me. I read it from a sad place, and all the characters, despite appearances, are just like struggling with these big questions. Yeah.
this actually leads on quite nicely to a good place to end talking about the book, because, long story short, this book escalates. There is violence. There is a gateway to a different world. There is challenges in dynamics. There is a lot of stuff that I will not spoil. But I often like to kind of bookend discussions about this, because you mentioned this just then, that this book came from a sad place and these characters are dealing with tough topics. Where did this book take you to a new place when it came to examining this stuff? What did the creative process of writing Our New Gods teach Tom the person?
Wow, that's such a nice question. Thanks for asking. It was very healing. I say that hesitantly because I don't think it reads as like a therapy book or a book like of someone trying to like express or like figure out some deep internal problem. But I went in with these big ideas that came from this like profound disorientation as I was in therapy. And over the course of the book, having told myself at the start, write the boldest book that you can, I understood what that meant during the process of writing, what bold meant in this context. And it meant going into the parts of myself that I didn't want to see, the hidden, the forbidden, the painful, truly like into the darkness, which required a lot of self-reflection, and it required me to face who I was or how I had behaved in certain relationships. And it was healing. It was very healing. I have a friend who's a psychologist, and I described this process to her, and she told me that it's shadow work. It's going into the shadow, to use that term from Jungian psychology. And now when I read the book, I'm impressed by the person who was able to do that and who wanted to do that. I think it takes great courage. But also I'm like, who is this guy? Like, who made these choices? Like, who chose to tell this story in this way? Because it did change me. I have a feeling that to write a book changes you, that it must, just because of what it requires to write a book. But this in particular, because it came from such a raw place, it really was, I want to say, exorcism.
Yeah, demons. The
demons.
Yeah.
So that's such a nice question. Who knows? Who knows? Like, if that's in the experience of reading it as someone who doesn't know me, but that's where it came from.
I think it's a bloody great book, and
Thank you,
I know
Nick.
that I think you should be really, really proud of it. Honestly, it's and
thank you.
It's writing a book. I think it's one of the hardest and most personal methods of creativity that there is. Not to say that there isn't personal elements in other creative methods like music or film, but it is a place that requires a lot of examination. You're in that world, and it can be very, very tough. And I think you should be super proud of this book, because it does do what you wanted it to do. It does set out, and it is bold. That is what it's definitely bold, and it is definitely an amazing, compelling read. And I now kind of want to ask as well. You mentioned that you have another story that you're currently writing. What is next for Tom after this story? Of course, after birth as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I've never had to talk about the book before in this kind of context, so this is new for me. I know what I'm interested in. I know like what I can do well. I think I do plot really well. And I think the power of plot and character for me, or what's really interesting and exciting, is taking characters into places that are complicated, that are dark, but also hold like great erotic potential and a great like energetic pull towards something that is bigger than them. I think there's like flavors of that in Our New Gods, and I sort of want to go deeper into that, where there's this ambiguous experience that's full of contradiction, and like what's there, you know, like what do we find there when we are just like taken into those places that are very peculiar and exciting for me. So there's more gays in Melbourne doing weird, bad things, essentially.
Ooh, exciting.
Let's do it. There's more to go. There's more to find there, I'm sure of it.
Well, whatever it is, it sounds like a place and a space that I think you should examine a lot more of. Do more of a deep dive, because it sounds really, really amazing.
Deeper. Thank you, Nick.
Let's go deeper.
Love it.
What we'll do is, to finish off this episode of the podcast, I hit you with a bunch of rapid fire questions. So you give me the first answer that comes to your head. So,
okay, dangerous.
Are you ready?
Yes.
First up, we are a book podcast. So the first question is, what is your favorite book that you have read in the last 12 months?
It's Narrow Rooms by James Purdy.
Ooh, I've not heard.
I think it was written in the 80s. He's a North American writer. He's writing about gay men who are just like kind of dark and twisted and fucked up, but it's also beautiful. This book has a sort of mythic tone to it. And it gave me nightmares. I was like, who is this? A friend lent it to me. I couldn't, like, no one publishes James Purdy. His books are so hard to find. But a friend had this book. And yeah, if you can get it, it's unlike anything else.
Oh, amazing. That sounds, I mean, I've never heard of him, so I immediately am curious as to stories that give you nightmares. So yes, please. I like deep examinations. What is your favorite debut novel that you've ever read?
Wow, that's so hard. I'm going to say What Belongs to You by Garth Greenwell.
Mm.
Do you know him?
I don't. This is new to me as well.
He's also North American, also a gay man. Surprise, surprise. He is writing about power, sex, love, desire. Very, very focused on an experience of consciousness that allows for like a great restlessness and nuance of emotion. The narrator is having encounters with a sex worker in Bulgaria. And then when I read this book, it kind of just like blew my mind. I was like, this is the first time that these kinds of experiences of gay desire, are being treated with like great like weight. And someone is finding art in these places that have, for me, otherwise like being relegated to the sidelines when it comes to literature. It kind of gave me permission. Like, that's wild. That's such a gift from Garth Greenwell. What a legend.
That's a great, isn't that? I love that. Love that answer that he gave you permission to go, yeah, we can talk about and discuss these topics and create documents that can be, what he did with his book left an impression on you and passed on to you, and then what you're doing with your work by extension can inspire and pick up somewhere else. So profound. out of off the topic of this,
Yeah.
Gay writers are very, I know, are a really important part of you. Out of curiosity, do you think
Mhm.
there is a particular writer that you would like to shout out who you think is being slept on and their work should be more appreciated?
Ooh, I love that question. Who's being slept on? I don't think he's being slept on, but maybe in Australia he is. Brian Washington is, he writes about community, writes about chosen family with such tenderness and without disregarding the darkness inherent in our lives. And he's just very contemporary. It feels like he's something new when he writes. So for anyone who's looking for a great book, Brian Washington.
I'll add it to the list. It'll be on the. It'll
Great.
be in the description. Brian will be in the description. Everyone, go check
Wow.
him out.
Brian, be my friend.
Brian, if you're listening,
be friends with Brian. Yeah.
If he has, if any socials exist, we're tagging him and saying, Brian, be Tom's friend.
Love. He's always posting great meals when he on social media. So happy to fly to the US and share a meal with you, Brian Washington.
I love it.
Good.
Do you have a favorite word?
Saudade is a Portuguese word that doesn't really
wow.
translate from into English, but it is like an experience of missing someone or longing for someone or something or a place. It's like it's an emotion, but it becomes imbued with, like, it's an emotion that can be imbued in things outside of a particular like experience. I think like it's broader than that. Yeah,
we should adopt that word. That's like a great, I think that's the first time
it's very beautiful.
Had a word. Yeah, I feel like that's the first time I've had a word on this podcast that actually isn't English, and I'm sad that we don't have a word for this particular feeling.
The limitations of the language, baby. Yeah, it's wild. It's so beautiful. It's such a beautiful thing to consider. I think it's kind of melancholy, but in a sweet way.
You go into your favorite coffee shop. I'm assuming that you live in Melbourne. Everyone drinks coffee there.
Yeah.
And your two absolute favorite writers or authors or heroes, could be anything, are waiting for you to have a fun roundtable discussion on creativity. Who are they? Who would you want to pick? Whose brains would you want to pick?
Can they be dead?
Of course.
Yeah, great. James Baldwin. I would just sit back and soak it in. What a legend. Truly like one of the great artists of the last 100 years. And Garth Greenwell.
Yeah.
I know he's also like a big Baldwin head and speaks about him and is very influenced by him. So if I could get those two people in a room, honey, I'm just sitting back and sipping my flat white.
Like, I don't need to say anything.
I'm just that you guys don't already know. Yeah.
I love it. This is a bit of a weird question to frame, but I'll try and do it as best I can. Do you think that pleasure can only be truly enjoyed and appreciated in tandem with the experience of pain?
Oh my God, Nicholas. Fuck. No.
I know, hit you with a psychological question. This is my mean question, my one mean question.
That's such a lovely question. That's a juicy question. I'm going to say no. I've had experiences of pleasure that are absolute, that are like the rare experience that is truly absolute. Like I know that through pleasure. But like, yeah, I love that. There's like pain is present a lot of the time, right? And something that I'm very interested in this book is like the crossover between those two things and what that is, like how it can be both or why it's both. So it's a fair question. It definitely links into the book, and the sex is so complicated in the book, but I have plenty of sex that is not complicated and is just pleasure. So it's possible. Don't think that it's not. Just because Ash is having a weird time.
My last question. As you mentioned earlier, this book came, from a sad place for you. And my last question is simply, are you happy?
I'm happy. Thank you.
Good.
I'm happy. Happy to say I'm happy. She's been through therapy. That's all I'll say. If you're not happy, try therapy.
It does work. But it genuinely does.
Maybe I don't know. I would also add that perhaps my happiness is transient, like all things. But there is a level of contentment, a foundation of contentment.
Thomas is content, and I think Thomas is honest with himself, which is all I want to know, which is good. It has been such a pleasure chatting to you, and it's been such a joy talking about this book, Our New Gods, which I'm holding up to the screen. For all of our readers, you can get this. This is your next exciting psychological thriller. It is here waiting for you. At the time of us talking, Our New Gods, well, at the time of us talking, it's about to come out, but when you're listening, it will be out. So be sure
and buy it, guys. Why don't you do that?
I think you should. Or you can get a copy of it down in the description. This is the world of convenience that we live in these days. But Thomas, thank you so much. It has been such a joy chatting to you on Date with a Debut.
Thank you, Nick. Thanks for having me on this beautiful date. It was a pleasure talking to you. I really appreciate all you do for debut authors. And yeah, all the best.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Date with a Debut, and for listening to the Words and Nerds channel. You can buy all books mentioned in today's episode down in the description box, and if you enjoyed the show, drop us a review, leave us 5 stars or a thumbs up. It really helps the show out. If you want to hear episodes when they drop, be sure to subscribe to Words and Nerds, or you can subscribe to Date with a Debut on Podbean to hear the latest episodes as they drop. Want to support the show more? You can also subscribe to my Patreon in the description to get early access to episodes, book reviews, recommendations, and a whole lot more. Catch you soon! Date with a Debut is a Words and Nerds and Breathe Art podcast co-production.